Almost 5 months after its expiration date, United States President Donald Trump has signed into law legislation that reauthorizes the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA. The move follows months of deliberations by U.S. lawmakers amid threats that some beneficiaries from sub-Saharan Africa would be booted from AGOA. Meanwhile, fuel prices dropped again this week, with significant price decreases confirmed for both petrol and diesel. This after the rand performed well against the US dollar, while oil prices dipped in early February. What does this mean for South African consumers? To find out more, we're joined by Lunga, Mahlaba, who's a market analyst, as well as Economist, Xhanti, Payi. Xhanti, I'll begin the conversation with you. AGOA being signed into law ordinarily would be good news. But there's legal uncertainty about what takes precedence. Trump's executive orders, which of course are subject of litigation at the moment, or him signing into law AGOA that passed through Congress and Senate. Do you have a sense of how this will play itself out?
Well, I think, obviously the fact that it has actually gone through, obviously, Congress and Senate and then signed by the president means it has followed the legal path that it should, and that's actually the way it should work. But also it highlights an important thing, that we know that while AGOA was many people think of it as a goodwill to African countries, or charity, or as it were, or some sort of support, it was actually also a very important foreign policy tool for the United States. Particularly because, the U.S. wanted to make sure that it continues to solidify its relationship with the continent and keeps at bay countries like China, who had actually been growing there. And so that still very much is the intention of the U.S. to continue to do that. As you know, we read all the time about how President Trump keeps talking about we want Greenland because China is going to take it. So there is still that tension. And they realize that it is important to use soft power such as this to rebuild these relationships that had been actually, weakened by the fact that they had removed AGOA.
Yeah. Look, I want to bring into the conversation here, despite the external shocks of Trump's tariffs and, of course, the rearrangement of global trade that came as a result of that, important indices in South Africa tracked quite well. The rand has strengthened in recent times, followed alongside a gold and silver rally, which means commodity prices trading higher, greater revenue hopefully is collected from that, and that gives the fiscus some relief. But more importantly, indices like and of course, as a market analyst yourself, you'll know that this is the indice that matters the most to you. And that is South Africa's bond yield returns, right? Those have performed incredibly well. In fact, better than its global peers in many instances. And that means that investors believe that South Africa is a stable country. Is all of this translating into relief for households and businesses?
Thank you kindly, and good evening to the listeners. Well, basically, we do take the positive outlooks with caution, optimism, because we do understand that the good sort of indicators that we currently are experiencing should then also be taken with a bit of salt, right? So basically, it means that the households must then be able to use some of these positive trajectories to be able to use the money in a manner that will then enhance their outcomes in the near future, because with the current economic environment, it would then help if the consumers or us as a public are able to then use those funds in a manner that will then enhance our outcomes on what currently is happening globally and here in South Africa.
Yeah, and of course, one would hope that with a slower inflation that we'd begin to see income catch up, for instance, to consumer price index. Are we beginning to see, Lunga, in the market that sort of movement?
Absolutely. So currently, we do note that currently there's that inflation targeting, right? So it does then provide that bit of gateway for consumers to have some sort of purchasing power, but that is within the shorter term. And we do note that the South African Reserve Bank has maintained its stance without changing the rates. We also then caution that, but we do then say, based on what currently the indications are showing us, we should then, or consumers should then be able to take some of these sort of benefits and use them in a manner that will improve their outcomes.
Yeah. Xhanti, industrial policy and trade policy are important instruments and levers in the economy to stabilize itself against external shocks. And of course, fiscal policy and monetary policy are important frameworks as well to ensure that we spend what we have right and that we demarcate right, at least the confines within which those transactions take place. Have we used those economic instruments sufficiently and correctly over the last 12 months, given what's been happening, in a way that sets us up for success? And of course, I asked this with the budget speech less than 3 weeks away from now.
Yes, so first, I guess it's important to note that there has been some positive developments. The rand is stronger. I guess some people say actually it's the dollar that's weaker. And so not so much that the rand is stronger, because obviously of the turmoil that we've seen in the United States. But there have also been some really positive developments in South Africa that are good. I mean, if you talk about the gold price, for example, that, those exports would have been a positive thing for South Africa in terms of the balance of payments, and so would have had some positive impact on the rand. We also know that an important area where we've also seen a level of confidence as we see, for example, infrastructure, railway lines coming on board. We're seeing some positive feedback in terms of the power and energy. So there is, I guess, the business confidence starting to lift a little bit. And I guess at the end of last year, we also were very excited to have hosted a very successful G20. So there is a level of positive momentum in the economy that is important. But of course, the issue of inflation itself tells us a different story, in the sense that inflation is not so much down because of good things. It's one area is that, of course, we don't have a lot of demand in the system. And therefore, when we don't have a lot of demand, when people are not buying as much, prices then tend to be lower. And then obviously when people have lots of money in their pockets and they are constantly coming to the stores, then you will find that inflation starts to tick up. But we've seen obviously from also that the inflation rate experienced that had a lot to do with food prices, which have moderated nicely. We also have seen obviously, oil prices also and commodity prices also, moderate. So this is a positive story, but it is not a story given the kinds of risks to the outlook, and this is what the Reserve Bank has said, that makes us very, very comfortable. But I think you are quite right when you say, so monetary policy has been important because it has now been accommodative, and that is something that's going to help many consumers, especially those who are highly indebted. And we know that that's been a big story over the past year, knowing that, people were borrowing from one credit card to pay another, that they're so overly indebted. And so that should actually give us a little bit of breathing space because of that. But that depends, of course, on what kind of debt people took. We know higher purchases are not the same. Also, if you're fixed, you will not particularly benefit. So that is something, obviously, that does not give us a lot of comfort.
Sure.
But also, it's important to recognize that lower inflation does not mean lower prices. So it just means that the increase in prices is actually lower, or it's actually
slower rather.
Yes, so it's slower. So we continue to see prices increase, especially for the poor. So what we are looking at here is obviously better than at least whatever you get, whatever increases we get are important.
Yeah.
So monetary policy has been very helpful in that regard. Fiscal policy, of course, is a different story altogether because, as we know, the economy is not growing. Hopefully, we will, the mining sector will give us something, maybe the gold. We have not done very well in terms of, our
And of course,
growth.
Commissioner, and of course, Commissioner De Ruyter still has to give that report, and hopefully he has some positive news around collection rates for the Minister of Finance, given the increased budget that they had received last year. Xhanti, I'm going to have to leave it there. Lunga, Mahlaba, thank you so much for your time this evening as well, for your insights.